2026 to 2030 plan. Yeah. Yes. So tonight we are going to look at the questions we have, and How-Sen will be here to answer the questions as best as we can about this buildings program, retrofit program that we hope will be coming as part of the city's climate action plan for 2026 to 2030. So I will introduce How-Sen in just a moment, but first I'm going to just say that I'm welcoming you here on behalf of Climate Fast. We set up this session and we open it up to everybody in the climate community that perhaps got the invitation. So those of you who are here, the ones that took the time to register and come, and we're very pleased to see you all. And if you don't get the Climate Fast newsletter, you can sign up for it at climatefast.ca. And we send a monthly newsletter. Linda is actually our editor, and it's a good publication to keep you informed, along with the newsletter that TCAN does and other newsletters you may already be receiving. So I'm at this point going to hand things over to Linda to do a land acknowledgement, and then we'll come back and start the program. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. Over to you, Linda.
Thanks very much. So just bear with me a moment. I'd like to acknowledge the sacred land on which we live and meet today. This land has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. It's the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Peyton First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We acknowledge that we meet on stolen land and do so to show solidarity with Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We recognize that decolonization must be an active and ongoing process of reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So now I'll just explain that some of us on this call are in fact part of a city strategy group that's part of the Toronto Climate Action Network. So that brings together people from many different groups, including Climate Fast and about 70 other groups under that umbrella. And at the end of the meeting, I'll explain what some of the next steps are that TCAN is going to be taking on the TransformTO plan. And Climate Fast is one of the advocate groups we've been advocating on behalf of TransformTO from 2015, when it first was a decision to create such a plan, in 2017, when it was first voted in by City Council, and in 2019, when the climate emergency was declared by the city, in 2021, when the first 5-year plan came in and was adopted, and also a climate advisory group was created, of which I'm one of the members, and How-Sen will also be one of the members. We're finishing a 3-year term, and we're starting our next 3-year term. So we've been involved, and that's included things like deputations on budgets and deputations on the programs of TransformTO all along. So we really want this plan to succeed. And it involves buildings, it involves transportation, it involves waste. And buildings are the biggest portion of the emissions in the city, so that's extremely important. So How-Sen Chong is the climate campaigner for Toronto Environmental Alliance, and he has a long history of environmental and climate advocacy, has worked with Sierra Club, Greenpeace, Environmental Defense, Indigenous Climate Action, and the United Nations Development Fund. He's been a digital campaigner for Stand.earth, working with Indigenous groups to oppose the Trans Mountain Pipeline. So, and I also know you have a knowledge about climate accounting, climate budgeting, and things like that, which we're trying to get carbon budgets at the City of Toronto. So that's not our topic for tonight, but I know it's an area that you know quite a lot about. So we're very pleased that you're here tonight. And as most of the folks were not here on November 5th when we did longer presentations about the plans, and you can watch those, listen to those on YouTube. We'll find a link and put it in the chat so you can get more information from there. But How-Sen will give a brief introduction about the building's plan, and after that, we will take your questions. So at any time, you can put questions in the chat. Um, and after the introduction, if you want to ask the question yourself, you can also raise your hand. And we want to have this to be a good interchange. Also, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, what group you're from. And as I say, you can put in any questions in the chat if you like. So, How-Sen, over to you.
Thanks, Lynn. I am going to hit the slideshow button. Great. Okay. Thanks for the introduction. Appreciate that. I'm going to try to go through this. I don't know how much people already know. I know there's a lot of seasoned veterans here on climate, but here's kind of where we are climate-wise, in emissions-wise in terms of climate change right now. So you'll see that the city's emissions, we hit our 2020 target um, as far back as probably 2011, maybe 2015, depending on how you count. And that's primarily because of the provincial coal phase out. And then in 2020, our emissions dropped some more based compared to 2019, probably mostly because of COVID. And we've been kind of inching up since. The city's GHG analysis is like 3 years behind because it uses federal numbers, but Toronto Atmospheric Fund does its own inventory, and that's not a typo. So in 2023, Toronto's emissions went up 1.2%. And in 2024, this was just released yesterday. Toronto's emissions went up another 1.2%. And next year, we're supposed to be 45% lower than we were in 1990. So we have some ways to go. And you may already notice that that in these charts from the city, there's that big green bar. And that big green bar is buildings. And so these are two ways of accounting for the same 15.5 megatons from 2022. And you can see in both these cases, more than 50% of emissions comes from buildings. So if 56% of emissions come from buildings, 35% comes from transportation, 9% come from waste. The chart on the right is the same number, but broken down by fuel type as well as by use type. And you see 51% of the city's emissions come from the burning of fossil gas, primarily to heat buildings, as well as to heat the water for buildings as well. So regardless as to what happens, Toronto has to cut the use of fossil fat gas from buildings. There's no way around it. So we've actually kind of been working at this for years. We already have a lot of voluntary programs, but the problem is only regulations is going to create transformative emissions reductions. So here's a list of various voluntary incentives that exist for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in buildings. And depending on what kind of building you are and how much money you need to borrow and what you want to do, you can qualify for any one of these programs or many of these programs. A lot of these have been going on for over 10 years or more. And some of them actually are undersubscribed, meaning that not enough of the very cheap money and the programming is actually being taken up. This is in particular the high-rise program for low interest loans for high-rise residential, because people don't need to do it. The large landlords don't actually need to do these reductions. And so there's a challenge here, and that's one of the reasons why we need regulations as well as as well as incentives, right? So you need both the stick and the carrot in order for us to actually move faster to cut the emissions from buildings. There's a lot of benefits to green buildings outside of the fact that the buildings themselves are like more climate and carbon friendly. So there's fewer toxic fumes from oil and gas combustion on site. Homes are more comfortable. Heat pumps are far more responsive on cooling than heating than a lot of other systems. Um, uh, Green buildings can lead to more protection from extreme heat. Green building requirements can actually improve building maintenance and upkeep. And it also creates a lot of jobs that can't be exported. So the estimate for just Toronto's green buildings to hit our climate targets by 2040, the estimation is 80,000 person year. So imagine other 80,000, you know, people being hired for a year to cut emissions from buildings. Other thing to note is that there's a wide support for green building standards. This past summer, we commissioned an abacus data to poll Torontonian support for green building requirements. And the polling takeaway is that support is extremely high for green building requirements across Toronto, and support is also high across demographic, geographic, and living arrangement types. And so there's two graphs here. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on these. The blue is support for government implementing green building requirements that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings that cause climate change, and then the red is people who do not support. So you can see there's 84%, and then the support is relatively stable across the various demographic pairs. So between men and women, between Old Toronto and outside of Old Toronto, between higher education and less than higher education, below medium income and above, renters, owners, single family homes versus multi-residential buildings. Support is universally high for requirements that cut emissions from buildings. Support for green building requirements that protect from extreme weather is actually higher. It's 92% overall. And similarly, you can see that support is pretty universal right across. Interestingly, the male-female divide is relatively high. It's not past the margin of error, but you can see that it is interesting to note that like support is universally high as well. So some people would go like, oh, well, maybe people who are renters are not going to be as supportive. No, renters are highly supportive. Oh, maybe people who are below medium income are less supportive. That's not true, right? Maybe people who live in multi-unit residential buildings or people who live in single family homes are less supportive. It's like, no, everybody is pretty universally supportive. Even if you look at the old Toronto versus the outside of old Toronto numbers, it's almost exactly the same. So buildings emissions performance standards in other jurisdictions. This is just a quick number here. New York, Boston, Vancouver, Seattle. The European Union is requiring all member countries to set a building performance requirement. In additional cities, Chicago, DC, Philadelphia, LA. These are all jurisdictions that have or are in the process of implementing building emissions performance standards. So that's New York and Boston have already started the compliance phases. So, what exactly is a group building emissions performance standard? What will Toronto's look like? So, this is just based off of the initial consultation documents that came to us in June 2025. So the city staff presented the following draft policy design to 120 plus organizations in the city's BEPS consultation groups. And basically, so
Mm.
what was that? Okay.
You just
Um,
keep going, yeah.
should I just keep going?
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Um, so how it was proposed to be set up in June of 2025 is there would be a BEPS for commercial buildings and BEPS for residential buildings. The BEPS for commercial buildings compliance would start with the largest buildings, 100,000 square feet or above. Think about like the big towers downtown. Then starting in 2030 and 2031, buildings that are 50,000 square feet, and then 2032 compliance would be for smaller, like maybe 20,000 square feet and above. And the reason why the compliance is so much further in the future than the passage is because buildings actually need some time to comply. So that's the same thing if I kind of go back to this, you'll see that when the law is signed, there's usually time that they give for buildings to actually comply. They give like, 3 to 6 years or 3 to 7 years time to comply. So they have time to actually comply. Because the idea here isn't to punish people, right? It's not to punish buildings. It's actually to solve a serious problem, and to give people some time to comply with that. The residential buildings emissions performance standards only for large residential buildings, compliance as proposed in June 2025 would begin in 2033, which if it was passed in 2025, which looks highly unlikely, it would give multi-unit residential buildings 7 to 8 years to prepare for compliance. As it's currently stands, it's not going to apply to single family homes. Other details, and again, these are all drafts, right? So this will give you an idea as to like how a BEPS can be structured and how it was being proposed to be structured. But what it will actually be will depend on a series of things. And I'll give you an update as to what we're hearing as to what will happen in December, anyways. But how it was proposed for at least phase one is that 85% of buildings will have already met the standard in phase one. It would set gradually increasing standards for buildings' GHG intensity. So basically, it's essentially emissions per square meter of space. It will include fossil gas for heating, hot water, and electricity use, and certain uses will be exempt, such as gas cooking, fireplaces, EV charging, that kind of thing. And the final 15% of buildings that don't meet the requirement will have until their compliance year to meet that standard, and they will receive extra support from staff. Um, there's a bit of error in that slide there, so I apologize for that. So what's going to be happening in December is a couple of things. One, this is going to be a very busy December in terms of city council on the climate and environment file. We are definitely expecting an infrastructure and environment at the Infrastructure and Environment Committee on December 4th, the TransformTO 5-year plan. We were expecting a report on buildings emissions performance standards. We do not know, and it seems as if that report is not coming. We were also expecting a bylaw to come to committee, and we definitely do not believe that a bylaw is coming anymore. So what we won't need to do today is to talk about how we can get the bylaw back onto the agenda. Under the other things that are coming to Infrastructure and Environment Committee is a report on trees, and we know that there's like a report on a pedestrianization policy as well. So there's other things there coming up. Also coming to the Executive Committee, we are also getting reports on extreme heat and climate vulnerability. And so those are also coming to council as well. Originally, the heat stuff was going to be going through the Housing and Planning Committee, but now it looks like it's going through Executive, which is December 9th. Okay, so this is what we need to do. Council needs to pass a BEPS bylaw, right? The other stuff is absolutely important. We need to reduce waste. We need to make it easier for people to get around without a car. So we need to cut transportation emissions. But buildings are the largest chunk of emissions, and most of those emissions come from existing buildings. So we need to pass a BEPS bylaw soon. If it's not December, then we got to do it as soon as humanly possible. And then also in the next few years, because of the reality of the retrofits, we need to find even more resources to augment the existing incentives, including federal money over the next 7 to 8 years before the first residential compliance years is theoretically going to begin in 2033. And then we also need to support tenants to challenge the corporate use of climate-related retrofits for AGIs. An AGI is what's known as an above guideline rent increase. Currently, if you're a landlord and you're doing a retrofit that saves you, the landlord, money, you are allowed to raise the rent of your renters, even though you, as the landlord, are the one saving the money. That's justified. That's like completely unjust, and is a huge, huge problem. Um, that's basically my presentation. Oh, one more thing. Yeah, let me just share this one more. Um, is to the next things we need to do for you for folks here, keep up to date because things are constantly changing as to what we're hearing that like may or may not be coming to council. And then sign up for deputation training. We are doing deputation. T is doing deputation trainings on the evening of December the 1st and at lunch hour on December the 2nd in preparation for December the 4th, the which is the Infrastructure and Environment Committee. Also, if you are part of TCAN or your organization is part of TCAN, we are meeting on December the 29th, which is the Saturday, to actually,
November,
sorry, November the
November.
29th, you're right. November the 29th, which is the Saturday beforehand, to actually read and go over the Toronto TransformTO 5-year plan, which is going to be a giant document. And so we encourage folks to do that as well. But definitely for the buildings piece, what we need to do is we actually need to get BEPS going. And so signing up for deputation to help pull BEPS back onto the agenda and hopefully get it passed sometime early in the next year before city councilors and the mayor starts knocking on doors for the election in the springtime would be ideal.
Mhm. Thank you, How-Sen. And you just hit on something really important, which is that over the next year, very central in your councillor's mind and the mayor's mind is the election in October 2026. They will want to win, and they will want to be putting forward a popular plan that their constituents in their riding are going to support. So this is why many of you on the call tonight are part of our wards groups. So you're actually involved in trying to work on getting support from your own counselor for the TransformTO plan. And so our sessions about buildings are so you better know what it is that you're advocating for. I want to mention that the timeline is so tight always. It's going to be the same thing for the budget when that comes up in January. There's only a week from when the material is presented in along with the agenda. So that's November 27th um, for the December 4th Infrastructure and Environment Committee. And that's the day you depute. So there's just 1 week to read, reflect, talk to other people, and plan what you want to say at that deputation. Um, so it's very tight, and that's why we have planned in there that November 29th session with TCAN. That's going to be hybrid. That'll be at the Friends Meeting House from 10 to 2 approximately, and then or hybrid on Zoom because we'll do it that way. And also the sessions that to train people in deputations that Hassan was talking about the evening of the 1st of December and noontime on the 2nd of December to just go over how to do a deputation. But this session tonight is so that people can better understand why it's so important that we have a buildings retrofit program and to prepare us to like lobby for that because it seems to be in danger of disappearing till after the next election, which would put all those timelines back by 1 to 2 years. And we're trying to meet emissions cuts. We need to, act. We need to step forward. So this is your time to to ask questions and pop them in the chat. And I'm just going to mention something that I have been thinking about, How-Sen, which I didn't, I'm used to calling this program BEPS, Building Emissions Performance Standards, but there's another term that staff have been using called furnace upgrades. They were looking for a more friendly, user-friendly term, positive, so they're calling it furnace upgrades. The reason being, one of the reasons there's this long time period is we're hoping that the buildings owners will plan when they're, rather than going out and buying a whole new gas furnace, they will realize this BEPS is coming and they will go out and get a different measure of heating. They'll electrify the heating system. So they decide to use that term furnace upgrades. So we might hear that more. Do you want to speak to that, How-Sen? And then I'll go to the questions in the chat, or to, if you want to raise your hands, I will call on you. And again, thank you all for coming so much. Okay, over
Yeah,
to you.
my understanding of the furnace upgrade program the city has already announced is that it is a residential only program that's
Okay.
voluntary, is my understanding. I mean, I haven't been sitting on the CAG meeting, so I don't actually know whether or not that language is starting to change within staff. It is true that that switching out a furnace will absolutely, well, switching out a furnace for a heat pump will absolutely cut emissions. But a building's emissions performance standard is actually not prescriptive, and that's kind of on purpose. If you get prescriptive of exactly what buildings need to do, you start getting into kind of like the building code, which is provincial, and the building code is, as some people may be knowing, is Toronto's ability to change the building code is being attacked by the province. But buildings emissions performance standards is not prescriptive. It just says a building needs to perform a particular way, but it doesn't tell the buildings how to do it. So it just says your building needs to do X amount of greenhouse gas emissions per square foot, meet it however which way you want.
Yeah.
That's
So
that's the purpose of that tool.
you could do extra insulation and new windows and, other ways of reducing your gas consumption and emissions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to just take a look at the questions. Um, okay, there's already some answers in there. Let's see. Um, okay, what city councilors are on board with BEPS? Catherine is asking.
Um, so that is hard to say. We know for sure that someone like Sachs, probably Morley, and probably Matlow are on board for sure. Everyone else is not to say that they're against it, but they're looking at the politics and they're afraid of the politics because their belief, and I very strongly believe that their belief is incorrect, is that the anti-climate crowd is very activated and ready to go after them if they do anything like this. But
Mhm.
I don't think that's the case, partly because all the social science shows that the more people interact with crazy weather, the less likely they are to engage in anti-climate politics. So that number has actually gone down. And here in Toronto, we've seen a lot of floods. We've seen a lot of wildfire smoke, which I never thought I'd ever see in Toronto. Extreme heat. Last summer there were, we saw like I think it was like two times more days over 35 degrees Celsius than we usually get over the summertime. We had like four major heat waves, which is more than I can remember. When I was a kid, maybe you'd get one or two. So I think that like the demand here is significant, but but partly it oftentimes takes, especially if you're somebody who doesn't follow a particular issue, like climate, for example, it can take people some time to get up to date on where like the modern world is in and around climate change. And so
Yeah.
that's why it's important for us to like get people out, send people messages. If you haven't already done the stand and tea action that would send an email message to your counselor, I highly recommend that you do
Can
that.
you can you put those links in the chat when you have a minute there so people
Yes.
can do it while we're on if they haven't done it already? And then if you can circulate to other people in your group, the group that you may be part of, that you may be representing tonight, that would be fabulous. Um, I wanted to just say about the counselors that they're like Diane Sachs is very good. There are Gord Perks is very good. There are quite a few counselors that are quite good. They are not the majority, however. Now, we do expect that on the Infrastructure and Environment Committee, we will have the majority. That, but we need to know, like Paula Fletcher is the chair. We need to know where she's at with this. And I don't believe we've been able to meet with her yet. Um, we know Diane Sachs. We believe Amber Morley will be in favor. And I'm not sure Rachel Chernos Lind is the other four. Those four women are the majority on the Infrastructure and Environment Committee. Then there are three men who are not reliable at all on environmental votes. Um, they generally vote against, and that is Pasternak, Cole, and um, Perusa. So, the ones that are for this, they need to hear from us because they need to know that we are encouraging them to stand strong and go for it. The ones who are against it need to know that, hey, they've got constituents who actually favor this kind of action. So that's the Infrastructure Environment Committee. Now, 2 weeks after it goes through there, let's say whatever goes to them is passed, and it can be amended from whatever staff presented to them. It can be amended to be stronger, it can be amended to be weaker, but then it will go forward to City Council, which will meet on December 16th to 18th. And that's when we need to have the majority of city councilors and the mayor. So there's 25 councilors plus the mayor. So you need to have 14 votes to pass. And whenever, like in this process, getting ready for IEC is where we're at right now, and doing those initial meetings that many of you have already tried to set up or maybe have set up with your councilors, then there will be that 2 week period leading up to the city council vote when we will want to be reaching all the councilors. That's in addition to these action letters, because the action letters are great, but personal contact, as in, let's say, phone calls to the councilors or a meeting with them, is even stronger. So we need a combination of a whole lot of letters going to them, which are copied to the mayor. And we also, you can also phone the mayor's office is another action, so that they can't use that reasoning that nobody cares about climate, right? Now, I think the reason why that they're fear the anti-climate organizing is because those people who love cars, don't want bike lanes, who want things to stay the way they are and just want to live like it's 1950s, those people are very loud, very organized, and they often are quite wealthy. So certain councillors may be vulnerable to that kind of organizing in their ward. Threats have been made against councillors, and I'll just give the specific example of Councillor Morley, who's very strong environmentally. Not everybody in her ward appreciates that, and she will have to contend with that, but she will. She's determined, but not all councillors are as determined as her, and so that's why we need to work on them and get to know them. Like when the wards groups establish rapport with them, make ongoing connections. We just got an article about these building standards put in Councillor Matlow's newsletter. It's quite a good article, quite thorough. And so that was a result of our meeting with him, and he agreed to do certain things, and we're going to have climate cafes in his ward in the new year. So it's very much something that we need to work on an individual level and also to the mayor's office. Okay, I've talked enough. Let's see what other questions we have. If anybody else knows of councillors that are supportive already, please put that in the chat or raise your hand and I'll call on you. And okay, we've got the deputations training sign up. Sharon's asking if we have a timeline. Would these landlords, building owners wait until very near the deadline to invest in the emissions reductions work? Do you know, how that's been working in other cities?
I
Or
mean, it's just started in other cities, so we don't know that for sure. But a couple of things to note. One, at least the version that we saw in June of 2025, only about 15% of any particular building type will not already meet the criteria when they set. Like they're actually going to like they were planning on setting that number, the GHG number, so that 85% of buildings already meet the criteria. So for that remaining 15%, it is A, it's a relatively low number of buildings, and B, the compliance is like, and if assuming that we get it soon, anywhere between 4 to 8 years down the road. While they're waiting, there is a bylaw currently in place that all of those buildings, for example, say you're building at 50,000 square feet, you already have to report your emissions and your water and your energy use to both the province and the city anyway. So the city will be getting that information on an annual basis. And so if a building is getting closer and closer to that compliance date and they're not meeting those numbers, staff is going to actually be helping those buildings out. They're not there to, again, they're not there to punish people, right? Like this is a mentality I think that that's kind of been like perpetuated by the environmental community for a while. It's kind of like, oh, if you haven't, if you aren't absolutely perfect, we're going to punish you, right? It's not about punishment. It really is about like, how can we help these buildings get through this process because they actually do want to meet these compliance
Yeah.
issues, right?
And I want to add to it that the the it's just kind of an effort to get organized and transform your building's heating system. It's an effort, or do a major retrofit. So it tends to get put off. So what this deadline does is it advances that within their thinking, and it brings it forward to the front part of the brain where they may incorporate it into their planning. It's important to know that everything that they can do to buildings pays back. It eventually pays back because it reduces the costs of heating and cooling the buildings. It also brings greater comfort in buildings that don't have air conditioning. Once they have heat pumps, they have AC as well as heating. And so it pays back. And this is why it's so important that they're not allowed to put any extra charges on tenants above guideline increases, because they don't need to. They're going to get the payback. What they need is financing, which is like low interest loans, combination of grants and loans, or even a company. I think there's a company called Efficiency Capital that will help buildings create that plan. They'll monitor it themselves. They'll set it all up, make it very easy for building owners to do. So the city is also trying to have a concierge approach whereby they provide support, kind of as How-Sen has said, to help the building owners do the planning, do the changes, and achieve the targets. So of course we should all be on board, because the 80 or 90 to 90% of people who support this includes probably a lot of building owners, because they have families and they also see what's happening with the climate and they want it done. But the reason why there's politics, even if 80 to 90% of people agree with the reduction, has to do with the loudness and the wealth and power of some of the forces against change. So therefore, we can't just assume that because we think a certain way, council's going to behave that way. We have to let them know. We have to push them and we have to support them. And so we have to be loud, right? Because the other side fighting them is going to be loud, and they have access to advertising, to, councillors can get PACs from business owners that supply a lot of money for their election campaign. Lots of things go on in terms of trying to get reelected. So they're thinking about those things. And if we need to keep them engaged with the community and on our side and working with them, and then we need to support them when they do run. So Amber Morley should get lots of support, and any of these councillors that help us out at this time, environment, they need to get our support when their campaign time comes forward, starting spring, summer. Okay, but that's why there's still a problem, even if we agree with it. Yeah, people think that 40% support action, but the number is 85%. But we need them to know that by telling them that. Our councillors need to hear it from us to believe it. They know about enforcement, extra bylaw officers. As How-Sen said, it's one of the reasons they're going to start with 15% of buildings to work with them and follow it through. I don't know if you want to say anything more about that question. Oh yeah, you said you get the information. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll
rents.
try to get that information, but
Yeah,
like already there's been an increase in bylaw officers because the city just
yeah,
really recently started rent safe
yeah,
to help tenants.
yeah.
Politically, depending on the councillors, some councillors will be more worried about the commercial buildings and some councillors will be more worried about the residential buildings. I think politically, what is going to happen if we are able to get this, that is that what we will do is likely first pass a commercial bylaw for the largest buildings, probably those above 100,000 square feet and those above 50,000 square feet, and then probably come back in a later year with compliance for the smaller commercial ones and also residential. So really what counselors need to know is that there is support. And so in addition to your own voices, it's also about organizing people in your own communities as well and getting more people in your communities to come out and speak, right? So the reality is, like, I'll give you an example. I have been a climate guy for literally decades, and I work at an environmental organization, and I have trouble getting FaceTime with counselors on this, right? Because they know that, like, I can engage a whole bunch of people in like on our list, but our list doesn't cover like specific geographic areas, and counselors are primarily worried about, their local folks. So in addition to the work that we do as an existing climate community, actually do need to do more in terms of identifying more people in our communities who are excited about this stuff and who really want to move forward on this and to invite them into this coalition to move as well over the next couple of years. Because this is not going to be the first time this is going to happen. We're going to need to do this more and more and again and again.
Mhm. And this is going to need to be an issue all through the election campaign if we want to actually achieve these targets, and take climate seriously. It's going to have to be, we're going to have to force it into those election campaigns. So all Wards Project team members should have received an email with links to resources and actions on BEPS. If you are part of a team and have not received it, please email wardsproject@climatefast.ca and we'll send it. There's a sign up link for T's deputation training. Do the owners know the city will help? Yes, they do. Um, yeah, the ones that have been consulted. Um, yes. And then, yes, there are funds available, Beryl, for residential property owners to update furnaces and do other measures to reduce emissions. You got to apply. There's this program called HELP, and you have to get an audit before and after, and then you'll get a low interest
S-
loan.
Sorry, the help is for
Go ahead.
residential buildings.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is that I thought that, oh yes, we're focusing primarily on other buildings, but the question was about residential property owners. Um, because the reason why they've exempted single family homes is because they're voters and they don't want to pressure voters to do work that they might not want to do work right away, so they already exempted them right up the top. But we should definitely be encouraging that, and many projects are doing so. There's an organization called then Toronto Home Energy Network, and there's a Facebook page called Toronto Home Retrofits that's done by one of our former Climate Fast members, Liz Addison. And those are resources for single family homes. And we need to encourage people to voluntarily step forward and do these. There's something called the Pocket Project in one area of town and also in the Huron, what's it called? That Huron area. Quite right. But right in the center of the city, there's a group that helps everyone in their community to transition to low usage, get heat pumps, also getting the stoves, induction stoves, and all kinds of things to reduce their energy use. These kinds of initiatives in local areas are extremely important. And if you and others, neighbors in your community want to do that, that's great. Or if you want to start a coffee group and try to get your counselor to come along to that and be part of it, we want this to be a collaborative effort. So it's something we're going to do with them. We're going to make it a winning strategy, win-win for them and for us. Beryl, did you want to supplement that question or say
Yeah,
a bit more on it?
I just wondered, is it the city that provides the funding support or federal or provincial?
There's multiple funding sources that includes the city. So the city has several funds that are specific to specific building types. So some of them are for commercial, some of them are for residential. The reality on the residential piece is the reality is the city doesn't have enough money to provide cheap and or free money to do retrofits for all the buildings that need that retrofit. And so what's happening parallel to this right now is that there is a movement of environmental organizations trying to get the federal government to start directly investing in building retrofits, partly because, again, just the green jobs argument is huge, especially if there's going to be a downturn in the construction market for new buildings as well, which looks like we might be in that position right now. And so 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 it's important to recognize that there is money out there and there is more that's needed. And then there are residential organizations, there's tenant organizations that are speaking up and saying, hey, we want buildings emissions performance standards too, because tenants see this as an opportunity to upgrade and just keep their building at a minimal level of maintenance, and also as a means of potentially getting in some programs that can help them fight above guideline rent increases that are being used for that corporate landlords are using. So there's a lot of support there. There's also like on the commercial side, quite a bit of support from like organizations like BOMA and a lot of the big building folks. They don't seem to have a huge problem with this commercial piece either. In fact, I know for a fact that like BOMA is currently writing a letter. And so
What's BOMA? Just
BOMA is like the
yeah.
building managers. I forgot what it stands for, but it's basically like the Toronto Building or Managers Association, which manages all these large, which is like an umbrella organization that includes like the Cadillac Fairviews and all these folks as well, these like giant building, commercial building managers. And so like I think it's important to recognize that there can be kind of like that there can be a lot of opposition to some climate measures, but there actually isn't that much opposition to this stuff as well. And so if you are asked about the climate opposition, um A, you being there proves that there's a lot of support. And also B, the climate opposition are just like a small number of people, right? Like this is not a big deal. Like New York City is already doing this, Boston is doing this. This is becoming like all of Europe is doing this, right? And so it's not an issue of us being like climate radicals saying we need to do this or the earth is going to burn. I mean, it's not entirely false, obviously, but this is also a policy that's becoming like a global standard. And so Toronto has an opportunity here to take a little bit more of a leadership role and to, especially in Canada, because I think all of Quebec is thinking about putting one together, but they haven't done it yet. And so it's important to say, hey, we want to move forward on this. Vancouver already has one, Boston already has one, New York already has one, the EU is starting one.
Mhm.
And so,
And can I just say, if you don't mind me jumping in, that Vancouver, the citizens had to defend theirs. They had a plan, it was in place, it was taking buildings off of gas, moving them onto electrification, and the mayor tried to overturn it. They have not a good mayor at the moment, Ken Sim. And hundreds of people came, including doctors on health issues, and hundreds of people showed up to depute, and they worked on their councillors. So the mayor did not prevail. They got the majority of councillors, and they kept their buildings program, transition program. And now they're having to save the whole climate plan because the mayor has now said he wants to ditch the whole climate plan in their next budget. And there are 600 people signed up to depute on that. So it's just an example, they're dealing with a really, awful pushback from a fossil fuel mayor there. But here, we don't have quite that much of a problem, but we do still have the challenge of showing council that we really care. We want to line up outside the door for these deputations. We want hundreds of letters. We want them to know that people care. And the people that oppose this, they probably won't show up. I don't know if any of them will show up to depute. They do their influence through other means if they oppose it. So we show up though, and we do it publicly, and we try to get the papers to write about it. They will talk about something. If there's a lot of deputants, strong feeling in the community about something, there's all City Hall reporters, they will write about it. Susan asked about other buildings like U of T, TDSB, and provincial buildings, and those buildings are not covered because they're not under the purview of the city. They're not regulation of the city. U of T is definitely working on reductions. John Robinson, who's at U of T, is on our climate advisory group, which we affectionately call the KEG, and he's very, very good on all of this. And we have a working group on buildings at the climate advisory group. That's very good. And so anyway, U of T is working on it, but all these other sectors need pressure as well. And now the BEPS letter, okay, the letters are going now. Like those action letters need to go now. They'll go to your councillor, they'll go to the mayor. Is that who they go to? And
Yeah,
the
they go to the
IEC, vice
counselors.
chair.
They go
They
to
go to
the.
Cole.
They don't go to Cole. They go
Oh
to
no, they go to
Fletcher.
Fletcher.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and so so those letters are going now. It's the deputations that are on December 4th, but even there, if you'd rather send a letter than show up, and you can either show up in person or you can just sit at home and join in on your computer. They will hook you up, so you can give it virtually or come in person on that day, or you can send a letter in advance. And those need to be before December 4th. So that's the crucial time leading up to December 4th. Big push. And then after that, we'll want to continue the push with any counselors who might not be on side. Maybe we'll have a better idea by then. If you get a definite answer from your counselor, let us know. And definitely the mayor. Yeah. If you feel like those are action letters, I think they're getting a couple thousand of those at the mayor's office, and maybe tens or hundreds at a counselor's office. They all kind of look the same. If you feel inclined to send your personal letter, that is even better, because it knows that you're not just clicking and sending, but you're actually thinking about it and want to personally ask a question of your counselor. And copy the mayor. Always when you write your counselor, copy the mayor. Can we leverage BOMA's support? That's good. I think we should find out if the letters are going to be coming in for the IEC How-Sen, whether these builders that are friendly to it are going to actually say so publicly. That letter is not yet public, but somehow if we can get them to make it public, that would be great. There's a contact list there. Thank you, Susan, for counselors, so you know how to contact your counselor. And we're just about at the end here. 8:26. So we're going to wrap up. I just wonder if could people take a moment and just put what part of the city you're from in the chat? Because I know we do, if you're from Scarborough, raise your hand. Do you know how to raise your hand on this reaction button? Catherine, great, you're from Scarborough. And I think added, maybe it's Don Valley rather than Scarborough. But oh yeah, there's some people are putting their areas in the chat. Thank you so much. It's just nice to know what areas we represent across the city, because that is our strength. And then if you can interest some of your neighbors, friends or neighbors in your area, that would be that's going to strengthen your presence for sure. Oh, this is great. Thank you, everybody, for putting your area in the chat. This is our strength, being all across the city. So I'm going to give How-Sen a minute or two to wrap up, and we'll probably send a follow-up letter. I think we will, to all of you with the recording link as well, and you could share that with others. And together we are powerful. That's what I want to say before we close. And also after um, open your visual, I can take a picture of our group just for kind of a record of this wonderful group today. So go ahead, How-Sen.
Yeah, a couple of things. If you can send me, I left my email address in there. If you can send me your name and where in the city you live, I think that'd be really helpful because amongst the my other roles, I am also on the TCAN's cities committee and the steering committee, and we are starting to think about having in-person meetings in different parts of the city. And so if I know you're in a particular part of the city, we can help engage you and then help you engage your neighbors as well into these in-person meetings, which will bring other people from the city into your neighborhood, who
Okay,
are climate.
we'll save the chat, How-Sen. So anybody who's put their area of the city they're in there, or we might already have that in our wards team list, then we can follow up
That's
for
great.
sure.
The
Yep.
other thing, the other thing as well is no one, when you talk to your counselor, no one is expecting you to be an expert in this space. And so if you at all feel as if there's a question that needs to be answered, you're not quite sure, feel free to send them my way. Usually, if it's a question that I can't answer, I'll send it to someone like Taff. But anyway, we can kind of encourage our counselors to talk to each other when, like, for example, if like I don't know something that I know Lynn knows, then I will usually direct them to Lynn. I think that could be beneficial as well, so they know that, we are a community here that knows one another. It is um, always a joy to work with hardworking, dedicated people in this space. I've been doing this for like 20, 25 years now, and it's never been boring. Um, it's exciting partly because I do think we don't need that many people to convince city council. So like when I was on these national campaigns, you'd send emails out and you would need like thousands, like five, six, eight, 10,000 letters in order for somebody in order to move like a particular decision maker or someone in the prime minister's office or whatever. But here you don't need that many. You just need a little bit. You need just like maybe a couple of dozen in this case to actually start getting something moving. And so I encourage you to continue to build your relationships around the city in your neighborhood and to build up the support in your neighborhoods because I do think, I'm from Etobicoke and, I have a soft spot for like Brian and all the folks at Etobicoke Climate Action because I'm from there. And I do think it's a powerful thing that we have. And one of the things that I wasn't here in the city for, but I know a lot of people here were involved in, was that initial push almost now 10 years ago for the TransformTO process. That original process started as far back as 2015
Mhm.
and then culminated in a report, I think, in 2017. Then we had the climate emergency declaration, and then the actual TransformTO plan was passed in 2021. So that's
Mhm.
6 years of work. And if you want to, especially if you yourself was involved in that, mention that. Tell that to your counselors. Tell them about the support of people who've been working on this for such a long time. You need to take action on this and need to convince your colleagues at City Council to take action on this as well because it's a deeply personal thing. So
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Hosen, and also a thank you to Linda for setting up the Zoom for us tonight. And a big thank you to everyone for coming. You can unmute if you want to say goodbye, and also I'll take a picture if I see people's faces there. Um, and look at those hearts coming up. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, lovely to see you. Thank you. Okay, I got a couple pictures. Got lots of hearts. And to get, oh, look at those hearts, Catherine. Yeah. That's we can really make a difference. I'm going to amplify what Housen has said because at our city level, cities do 70% of the emissions come from cities. Toronto is Canada's largest city. If we can cut our emissions here, we can be a great example to the whole country and internationally. And so we can make it happen. Okay, thank you, everyone.